just suddenly. And then from that softness sprang it's very difficult to discuss this. It's a peace and a sense of incomprehensible joy and oneness, a joy that almost brings tears, that kind of a deep, deep joy. And from that first moment, I just sat there and the tears began to flow before I wrote more than 10 words. I can recall the experience of the ink blotting on the page. I was using one of those, felt tip pens. And the ink was running as my tears were flowing. And it rarely is less than that. I've kind of gotten used to the experience now. So I'm aware of what's going to happen. But I know what it feels like. Have any of you ever been present at the moment that a baby is being born and held it in your hands for those first 3 or 5 minutes of its life? And have you ever had that experience? That's what it felt like. It felt that way, like when I held my child for the first few moments of its life and looked in its face, and there was no other feeling I could have except oneness, complete connectedness, love that knew no limitation of any kind and no condition at all. Just a sense of, you can't even put it into words. That's how it felt. Like holding your newborn child in your hands. That's how it felt. And I knew in that moment that I was, in fact, holding a newborn child in my hands. I knew that I had given birth to a new me. I didn't invoke the voiceless voice at all. I think what happened was I simply called out to the universe, really called out to God, as many people do in their moments of quiet and deepest desperation. My God, what do you want from me? And really my question was larger than that. If I'm to stay alive, how am I going to do that? Because I didn't really want to even stay here. I wanted to just check out. So I kind of challenged God in that moment. Either give me a reason for living or I'm gone. I just don't get this. Don't get what's happening here. When I first heard the voiceless voice, it was very much as if someone was whispering in my right ear. And the feeling that came over me was one of extreme calm. I want to say becalmed. Very much at peace, and filled with kind of an indescribable joy. I think of moments in my life when I've had that joy. The moment that I married Nancy, not even the whole ceremony, but that particular moment when the minister finally said, do you? And in that moment I looked in her eyes and I just paused for a moment and said, I do. And it was just that tiny sliver of a moment when your whole body is filled with something you can't describe. That's how it felt in that moment when I first heard that voiceless voice. Just joy, a peaceful, calming joy. From the beginning of time, all we have ever wanted was to love and be loved. And from the beginning of time, all we've ever done is create moral constructions, religious taboos, societal ethics, familial traditions, philosophical constructions, all manner of rules and regulations telling us who, when, where, what, and how we may love, and who, when, where, what, and how we may not. And unfortunately, the second list is longer than the first. How are we doing? What are we doing? If I walk up to the sky and I see the beauty of me, sees the beauty of you, what is wrong with that? Or if I walk up to a stranger and say, I see who you are, how is that not okay? I don't understand how we decided to construct it here, people, but I gotta tell you this, if we don't change the construction, we will never have the truest experience of who we really are. I recall sitting in a room full of people a little bit larger than this not too many weeks ago when I was facilitating a retreat in the beautiful mountains of Colorado in Estes Park. And in that room, a person said to me, I wish I could experience abundance. And that was his issue. And he said, I don't make a great deal of money. I have barely enough to get by. I had to, really squeeze the pennies to get here, and so forth. And he said, I've all my life wanted to experience the kind of abundance that I see you, and he pointed to me in front of the room, experiencing. And I said, well, if you really want to have the experience of abundance, why don't you spend our lunch hour giving abundantly of that which you have to give? And he looked at me, astonishingly enough, and he said, I have nothing to give. He really thought, he wasn't even making that up, he really thought he had nothing to give. And so I had to look at him and begin to say the obvious. Do you have any love to give? Oh, he said, and he wasn't even sure about that. But he, I think, had to concede the point that perhaps there was a morsel of love within him that he could give. He said, yeah, I suppose I have some love to give. I said, do you have any compassion? Does compassion reside within you at any level? Yeah, well, I suppose I have a little bit of compassion. People have called me a compassionate guy. He was having a hard time saying the word compassion in the same sentence as the word me. But he allowed as to how perhaps he had some of that to give as well. I said, do you have any humor? He said, oh yeah, everybody say I have a great sense of humor. I got enough jokes to last for a lifetime. I said, terrific. And we made a list of the things that he had in abundance. But of course, he didn't think that had anything to do with abundance as he was describing it. I said, okay, let's agree that we disagree on our definitions of what is abundance, but let's agree that you do have an abundance of these things. We could agree on that. I said, great. Now, well, here's what I want you to do. Spend your lunch hour, and I want you to give of these things that you have acknowledged that you do have in abundance. Give of them in profusion. Give more than you ever gave before to everyone whose life you touch while we're on our lunch hour. That's my challenge to you. And he agreed to accept the challenge. And so he went off on the lunch hour, and he began to outpour that of which he had abundantly. On everyone, there were like maybe 600 people at this place. 200 of them were in our retreat and 400 from other places. So there were lots of strangers who didn't know who this guy was or what he was up to. So he walked into the cafeteria, and it was like a major confront for him, because it was like, well, my group knows that I'm going to act crazy now. But the rest of these people don't know that I'm not going to act kind of nuts. Because you see, when you give of yourself abundantly, half the world calls that crazy. See, they say you must have something going on with you, something's wrong. People don't act that way, which of course is the problem. People don't act that way. So here he is walking up to people in the cafeteria, and he is sharing abundantly of that which is abundantly his. He's sharing of his love and his good cheer and his humor. He was telling jokes all over the cafeteria. Some folks were laughing, ha 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 ha, that's pretty funny. And other folks were laughing, ha ha ha. Who is this guy? But everyone couldn't help but have a little grin, even those who didn't think his joke was that funny. Couldn't help but grin a bit at this wonderful guy, this Santa, who just showed up in the cafeteria all of a sudden. And he was going around saying wonderful things to people, and just, the one person that's happened was not in that bit of a mood. And it was his opportunity to show some compassion, and he showed compassion by not telling any more of his bad jokes. But then he sat down next to that person and said, I don't know you, but I'm from this other group that's doing a retreat in the other lodge. Everything okay? before he knew it, he had become involved in a conversation with God. And he got to express that part of himself. This guy came back from the lunch hour feeling so huge, see, feeling so big. And he said, I can't tell you. I said, how I feel. I said, do you feel abundant now? He said, yes, I do. I feel abundantly wealthy with all these grand parts of me that I haven't really given myself permission to express. That is to say, express, push out, to express, to push out. Hadn't given myself permission to do that. But what was really funny, and here's the trick that the group played on him, while he was at lunch, somebody went to the room and got their hat, and everybody in the room put money in the hat. So that when he got back to the room, the guy had like a lot of money in the hat, because the room just wanted to prove to him, you know, what goes around comes around and all that. It was this incredible in-the-moment experience of the truth. And he just sat there, scrolling on. The tears started to flow. And he had a direct experience of what is eternally so. That which you give to another, you give to yourself. And you can give it in one form, and it will come back in another. But it cannot fail to come back to you, because there's only one of us in the room. And his life changed out of his new awareness of what abundance truly is.